We're about 2 hours out of Denver. It's late morning. We get off the interstate at Cheyenne and take Highway 85 north. 10 minutes later, we're in open country. This is the high plains at the tail end of winter. Sparse, dry grass and ornery scrub as far as the eye can see. And a view very much like this one goes on for hundreds of miles. But I've always liked driving roads like this. Next to no traffic, and you come over a rise and see the asphalt diminish from a strip to a ribbon to a thin line 5 miles away against a backdrop of clouds and sky. All that empty space is its own brand of awesome. It's spring break. Some folks are flying to Cabo or Cancun. Noriyo, Zack and I are driving to Williston, North Dakota. Williston is my parents' hometown. Mine too, up through 3rd grade at St. Joseph Catholic School. The family moved out of Williston in the late 60s and out of North Dakota soon after that. But after many years in many different places, Bob and Margaret Kaluza are back in Williston for good. My dad died over 20 years ago. Mom died in 2013, and after the funeral service at St. Jude's Parish in Lakewood, my oldest brother, Robert Kaluza Jr., drove her casket to Williston, where she was buried next to my dad in the Green Acres section of Riverview Cemetery. From Denver to Williston is a long drive to make a cemetery visit, but a few months ago I decided it was time. When Noriyo visits her family back in Japan, without fail, she visits her parents' grave. It's what the Japanese do. So she was on board with the road trip north. In a bit of a surprise, Zack said he'd come too. The high plains of eastern Wyoming aren't completely empty, of course. Picturesque ranches slowly slide into view every few miles. We pass through some small Wyoming towns. They haven't gotten any bigger, but enough young people have decided to stay from one generation to the next that the towns are still doing fine. We get gas in Newcastle, and when we drive out of town, I mention to Noriyo, I could live there. It's become a joke, as I've said it a lot over the years when we pass through nondescript little towns. I've lived in big cities for too many years to think I could actually make a go of it in a little town. But memories of my small town Williston childhood bubble up at times like these, and nostalgia tugs at me, and I start to wonder, with retirement just a handful of years away now, maybe not. We detour east into the Black Hills. Some years back I watched the excellent Deadwood on HBO, which makes me curious to see the seat of such rootlessness, but a visit to that particular little town will have to wait. We stop instead at the Crazy Horse Monument, clearly a work in progress, and later Mount Rushmore. A night at a Rapid City hotel, and the next morning we find our way back to Highway 85 and continue north. It's colder as we cross into North Dakota, and the landscape's whiter with unmelted snow. Zack's behind the wheel, as he has been most of the trip. He keeps his alertness and focus well, despite the sameness of the surroundings. We take a rest stop in Bowman and buy some sandwiches to eat in the car. An hour or so later, we see the first signs of the oil boom that's transformed this part of the state. From here to Williston, traffic on Highway 85 is heavier, with oil tankers and beefy pickup trucks and trailers hauling modular housing. When the boom was in full swing, the oil companies built man camps to accommodate all of the new laborers coming to the region. These worker barracks still dot the countryside. It's clear that what's found below the soil is much more valuable than what can be grown on it. We get to Williston about mid-afternoon. There's a new turnpike that bypasses a good part of the town, but we drive down the entrance to the town I remember, with the grain elevators and the implement stores. Back in the day, this road was part of the circuit that high school kids would cruise on weekend nights in the summer. Maybe they still do, or maybe they cruise down the newer businesses on the north end of town that sprang up after the oil boom. Or maybe cruising down Main Street on a summer night is a casualty of high-speed internet, the great social forum for teens that has made relics of all those Dairy Queens and Tasty Freezes. Okay, I confess, my memories of Williston are a kid's memories. We walked 4 blocks to school and went to Mass every weekday morning. We had dirt-clod fights in the alley after school, and on Saturday mornings rode our bikes out of town to the high grass to catch snakes, and then stayed up late and played kick the can and sang to the bats and saw night skies bursting with stars. We bought candy at the corner market and walked to Grammy's to have rhubarb pie. But contrast those kids' memories with my mom's only half-joking dread that one day she might end up back in Williston, which, of course, she did. We get to Williston in mid-afternoon with some time for me to drag Noriyo and Zack with me down memory lane. Grandpa Frank Kaluza was a railroad man, engineer on Great Northern number 3059, now enshrined near the train depot. With a Polish Catholic dad and an Irish Catholic mom, the Kaluza kids attended St. Joseph's Elementary School. And for years, this house on 2nd Avenue East gave shelter to 8 family members, the occasional uncle and aunt, and a range of pets, including a squirrel monkey named Maud. We stayed the night at the El Rancho, a frequent breakfast spot for my parents and their friends. Breakfast at the El Rancho, I found out, was discontinued many years prior in favor of a high-priced brewery pub. The next day, we ventured out to do what we came to do. We called ahead to visit the small office for Riverview Cemetery. The woman behind the desk asked us who we were looking for, looked through some online records, and then gave us a map with my mom and dad's gravesite marked. It's not exact, she apologized, but it's right around there. So we set off looking.
I found it. Right there. Robert M. Kaluza.
We spend a few minutes at the gravesite. Noriyo lays some flowers we'd picked up earlier, and Zack lays his phone on the headstone to get GPS coordinates. Noriyo says a silent prayer, I assume in Japanese. My dad fought the Japanese in World War II. Times change. Now that I find myself in front of the gravestone, I realize I have no speech planned, no profound observations ready. I'm glad that Mom and Dad are together in Williston, even if the charming small town they grew up in is now man camps and oil tankers and loud pickup trucks. The next morning, we fill up with pricey gas along the new bypass, and soon we're back on Highway 85, going back the way we came.